Hello fellow cineenthusiasts, my name is Christina and welcome to another Let's Get Reels movie review. Today's movie I will be reviewing is Crimson Peak. Crimson Peak is set in the 1800s and it begins with a young girl named Edith Cushing. She loses her mother to a disease and she explains that she has always believed in ghosts because the ghost of her mother had come to her and warned her to beware of Crimson Peak. 14 years later, Edith is a young woman. She's an aspiring writer. She's writing a story that has something to do with ghosts based off her experience. Instead of write it out, she wants to type it. So she's in her father's office, and this young baronet named Thomas Sharp, played by Tom Hiddleston, comes in. He has a meeting with Edith's father, who is a very wealthy architect, and what Thomas wants to do is to get capital or an investment on building a machine that could dig the red clay that is on his land out. Cushing decides not to go with Thomas's plan because it didn't work out, and he just feels that Thomas hasn't worked with his hands enough, and he hasn't worked like the Americans have worked for everything, because Cushing had to work for his building. He actually knows what he's talking about, while Thomas, his hands aren't rough. Thomas has fallen in love with Edith a little bit. He's pursuing her very heavily, and he has another motive. He is in town with his very eerie sister Lucille, played by Jessica Chastain, and it becomes obvious that they have different plans, that maybe Thomas is only after Edith for his money, which turns out to be the case. The father doesn't like the Sharps very much, and he has them investigated to find out if there's any reason why Edith should not marry them. And he does find things out, which we will find later on in the movie what everything is. And the father tries to pay them off to just leave town. He wants Thomas to break Edith's heart and to just leave. Big shock. The father winds up dying and leaving all the money to Edith, and then Edith and Thomas get married. After they are married, Thomas takes her back to his home in England called Allerdale Hall, which is this creepy, eerie, awful, dilapidated, crumbling, disgusting old mansion. It sits on a clay mine and is just literally sinking, and the clay is seeping through the walls as if it's like water coming down the walls that have been leaking from pipes, and there's holes in the roof. It is just the worst place ever. It looks like it needs to be condemned. It's like the perfect haunted house. And to make the house even more creepy, more eerie, and more sinister, when it snows, the red clay comes up and the snow turns red. It's like a blood red. And Thomas lets Edith know that when the clay comes through in the snow, the house is called Crimson Peak. Edith soon begins to wake up in the middle of the night hearing things, and she begins to see these red dripped ghosts and so many of the rooms and the hallways in the house. These ghosts are warning her about Thomas and Edith, and you will have to see why they are warning Edith against her husband and her very creepy sister-in-law. Crimson Peak was really good. The story was very interesting. It was different from other ghost stories. The book that Edith is writing, she tries to explain that the ghosts are just part of the story. It's not about ghosts, and that is exactly what this movie is. It is a bit of a ghost story, but the ghosts aren't the main focus. They don't come in as much as you would think they would, but they do obviously play a very important part in this whole story. I felt that almost right from the beginning, the story moved very slowly. It took a while for the drama to really build up and to really to get to what Thomas and Lucille's plan was. And that kind of got a little bit boring, and I think I was expecting to see more ghosts and see them more frequently than you did, but I wasn't really bothered by that. I kind of like the way the ghosts would just pop in and out, and they really weren't, like, they were terrifying to look at. They really were, but they weren't as scary as I was thinking that they were gonna be. Guillermo del Toro wrote and directed this movie, and I actually forgot that he wrote and directed it, and I was thinking the whole time, like, this reminds me of The Devil's Backbone. If you haven't seen The Devil's Backbone, Guillermo del Toro also wrote and directed that. And the ghosts in both of these movies are very eerie, but they want something. They're trying to help. And wherever they were killed or, whatever, wherever they were stabbed, like, blood kind of runs out of their wounds, and it looks like they're underwater and the blood is, like, coming out that way. And like I said, I totally forgot that Guillermo del Toro wrote and directed Crimson Peak, so I was thinking the whole time, like, my God, this reminds me of The Devil's Backbone. And I'm like, that's why. And both movies are excellent. He did a great job with the direction. He really did a good job with focusing on, like, the creepy aspects and, like, the human aspects and certain other things. The house was outrageously, like, scary looking from the moment you stepped in. You're like, why would anybody be living in a house like this? And I think he really captured that very well. The acting in Crimson Peak was unbelievably brilliant by the three main cast members, especially Jessica Chastain. Someone just needs to hand that woman an award right now. I'm not talking about for Crimson Peak. She was unbelievably fantastic in this movie. I'm just talking about in general. I have such a crush on this woman's acting. It's very artistic in a way. It's very believable. You can just throw Jessica Chastain in any movie and it just does not suffer. And the movie just does not suffer because her acting is just so brilliant and so unbelievably perfect. Like, I'm just gonna keep saying unbelievable because that's what it is. She was perfect from the moment she came on screen, I mean, to the very end. Her acting, it was like some of the greatest acting I have ever seen on film. Like, and in that moment at the end, when everything just all kind of starts to fall apart for Thomas and Lucille, that is when Chastain's acting really just comes into force. You're not watching for one moment in this movie or any of her other movies. You are not watching Jessica Chastain. You are not watching an actress. You are watching a character. You're watching a totally messed up character. And she was just great. She was just great. If ghost stories are not your thing, but you really like fantastic acting, just see this for Jessica Chastain. You will not be sorry for 1 minute in this whole entire movie. Tom Hiddleston, he's another actor that's very great in whatever role that he's given. He wasn't very stand out in this movie. Again, like I said, Jessica Chastain, which is great. She just really, really took the whole movie. Mia Wasikowska was great too. I really like her acting. Crimson Peak is definitely worth going to see in the movies. It was something that is very different from what's out there today. It's a lot different than the ghost stories that normally come out around Halloween. It wasn't like slasher porn. It wasn't completely filled with ghosts. It was just a really great balance of ghost stories, like psychological issues, and everything about it was just creepy. Again, that's like a big word I said throughout this movie, but it's creepy, it's eerie, it's so like unsettling and very uninviting. You almost kind of feel like uncomfortable watching it, and you feel uncomfortable like almost every time that Lucille is on the screen, and as the story progresses you get more and more uncomfortable with the Sharps, and that is what I think also adds to its eeriness as the Sharp siblings as well. I cannot suggest enough to go see Crimson Peak right now. As soon as this is done, if you're watching it during the day, go see it as soon as you can. It was such a great, brilliant, well done movie, and I cannot say any more about it. Thank you for watching my review of Crimson Peak. If you like this at all, if it was helpful in any way, give it a thumbs up. If you have seen Crimson Peak, don't forget to leave a comment down below so we can further discuss the movie. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button for future movie reviews. As always, keep watching movies and stay absolutely fabulous.